So we're just waiting for one of our panelists just to get mic'd up, but before we do, there's a reason why we had this session last. I wanted to do sort of a view from around the world and get the perspectives from people outside of Europe, largely, because we are quite sort of Europe focused here. And one of the other reasons for that is, we're all about sort of driving the commercialization of the sector, and that includes cross-border partnerships and knowledge. And also, us ourselves as an event want to attract more people from outside of Europe as well. So this is sort of like, for me, a little bit of a lead into next year, to 2024, and maybe we will open the event sort of next year of this session. So anyway, we'll get straight into it. So I'm just going to ask the gentlemen to introduce themselves, where they work, etc.
Paul, thank you. Mark Laurenzo with the State of Iowa Economic Development Authority. Just a quick word about Iowa. It's an agricultural state in the middle of North America, well connected by transportation infrastructure, Class 1 rail, the Mississippi River, our interstate highways. We're an agricultural state, produce corn, produce soy, feed that into animals. That produces the bio-based raw materials you're looking for feedstocks, including proteins, carbohydrates, fats, oils, and grease. And we also a leader in renewable energy production due to the investment in wind power, having 13 gigawatts of renewable green power for your LCA. So it's a good place to do business. And we've also developed into the leading transportation fuels producing area of our country, producing ethanol and renewable biodiesel.
Thank you. Luigi?
Yeah, so my name is Luigi Vandi. I'm from University of Queensland. That's based in Brisbane in Australia. I don't know if many people know where that is, that it's at the very east of Australia. And actually, I was thinking, Paul, you mentioned, next stage, trying to go global. So in 2032, Brisbane will host the Olympics. So I don't know if World Bio Market, that could be a potential date to align with the Olympics, or at least on that year. And so at University of Queensland, I work in a center for advanced materials and processing and manufacturing, so very materials focused. And we develop a really commercial focused solution for industry partners. So we have a lot of demand on the bioeconomy space, and we try and deliver a really sustainable material solution for our clients. Yeah.
And myself, Ramjee Subramanian. I come from the south of India, Bangalore. And I'm working as the head of innovations of Pakka Limited. And Pakka is a company which works on agri-value chain to produce products in terms of flexible packaging and rigid products. Flexible packaging, specialty papers, those are one stream. The other stream in terms of rigids to look at wet molded products. So we are into the biomaterials and bioproducts.
Thank you, Ramjee. Because we have a little bit shorter time, we're going to get some real sort of quick answers, right, so we can get through everything. So I'm going to say, Ramjee, starting with you, how would you describe the status of the bioeconomy in your country or region in one sentence?
It's mind-boggling upswing. Absolutely the place to go.
Okay, I'm going to ask about another sentence. I was being ridiculous. And why is that?
From the bioeconomy will be the estimated numbers are in 2021, 80 billion USD, and targeting 300 billion USD by 2030. 2.6 in terms of from the budget, it's 2.6% of it as of in 2021, which is targeted to go to 22% by 2030 in that direction. 1,000 startups in 2021, and they are targeting 10,000 startups in bio sector, and the entire economy, they're transitioning towards bio in terms of pharma, in terms of agri, in terms of industrial. So This is the place to go, as I see.
Expecting an announcement of world biomarkets in India pretty quickly, I think. And Luigi?
Yeah, so look, I think Australia, I would say, has a very favorable political framework, so very encouraging. Australia has huge amount of resources available, so that's very encouraging. We also have, I think in Australia, it's really, so they're taking steps in the right directions, for sure, and I also would say there's a lot of potential in Australia. So for example, we have huge bioresources, a lot of waste management issue, which I can expand on, and a lot of also with regards with the energy, there's a lot of things to talk about there. So the transition to sort of biofuels and using renewable energy. But there are steps in the right direction, and I think also, huge potential there. That's pretty much what I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Mark?
Yeah, I'm happy to share some data from a recent study done by Techonomy Group. So over the past 5 years, and before the pandemic, if you will, to last year, that R&D grew in our state, both industrial and academic, attracted additional funds that are available. Innovation also was a real beneficiary, that patents and publications, that kind of output from R&D indeed grew as well. Growth capital, which is always a challenge for us in the Midlands, if you will, actually in ag tech was very favorable, grew very favorably, and some 25 deals, $80 million, which is pretty darn good for us. And the industry saw good growth. Job growth kind of slow, but it took in that period, even though those are essential industries that were worked during the pandemic, that job growth was slow, but what positive. Productivity gains also saw in there, again, a beneficiary of innovation in those investments as well. And we've seen some very interesting projects, some which you've heard from. You've heard from ADM at this show and some of the work that they're doing. Helm as well is a very exciting 1,4-BDO project, working with Cargill and Genomatica. And Spiber and ADM is another one, making some brewed proteins. Those are both construction projects underway. So some good projects, some really interesting projects underway as well.
I'm gonna obviously we prepared a few questions before this, so I'm going to jump to the last question in my list just to warn you, and I'm going to come to you first of all, Mark, because I think it's a more obvious one for you to answer maybe, but given that, there's great opportunity, basically in summary you said there's great opportunity, right? So what is the best way of international partners accessing that opportunity, either learning about the sector or finding partners to help them access that?
Yeah, that's what I do, and everything from site selection to connection to supply chain. Obviously, attending World Biomarkets and other events like this is very important. Meet face to face, and again, we're able to travel. I have this report, this kind of strategic plan, if you want to say, that's available. It's not quite ready for publication yet, but if you want to let Paul know or send me a note, I'm happy to provide it to you. But as always, we're looking for inward investment. We're looking to connect supply chain partners. And again, with the bio-based raw materials we have and the renewable wind power, I think it's an interesting place to consider doing business, whether it's pilot and you're scaling up or you're going to full commercial scale. And we certainly heard the need to scale a few times at this event. So,
and Luigi, what would be your sort of advice?
Yeah, I think, the main thing is really to connect with the Australian government. So they also have reports. They also have a clear picture of what the challenges are in Australia. So if we just take the topic of energy, for example, I think Australia has that huge potential. Like I said, that we have the best solar and best wind conditions from around the world, but yet, we also have huge coal and gas industry, and still 70% of our energy still comes from coal and gas. And then there's mandates as well. So in Australia, we have a federal government with different state governments. So we have the states of Queensland and state of Western Australia that are more favorable to sort of biotechnology. They have mandates for biofuels, for example. So that means they enforce the use of biodiesels, bioethanol. Those are produced in Australia. But again, they only represent, I think, 1 or 2% of consumer use of biofuels. So it's really understanding what the landscape is, being in contact with the government. Like I said, there are a lot of publicly available reports. And then seeing where the technology that you have can fit in to Australia. So anything that's, like I said, on the biofuel, anything that uses a lot of the bioresources available in Australia. We have a huge sugarcane industry. And all that, then I think there's a huge appetite for it in Australia.
And Ramjee?
First pointer is the government of India is taking enormous steps to boost the bioeconomy, and therefore the Department of Biotechnology is putting huge amounts into the area, both for the growth of the economy as well as for research and development. Right. In addition to that, the states in India, the different states in India, or for example the states where I come from, which is Karnataka, there is a huge push given for biotechnology. Given the status of where the things are in terms of the upswing, there is definitely critical requirements in terms of the research and developments, in terms of the scale up, in terms of not everything is all available, so there is a requirement of scale up. And given the population of the first in the world, which is 20% of the globe, there is a huge requirement of the market as well. And therefore, in all the perspectives, I think it stands out that you can collaborate with the government, you can collaborate with the individual organizations or the companies, and here I am looking for collaborations.
Yeah, so it's good to hear that go to the governments. So one of the things that we could do as well, Biomarkets, is try to bring the governments to here, right? Get them to get them here so they can access, our European and North American friends. I think Luigi, you mentioned something about then sort of consumers, right? And I'm just interested. How high up the agenda or the knowledge is bio within sustainability for consumers?
Yeah, in the consumer. So I would say in Australia it's quite high. So among consumers, there's a really good understanding of the environmental impact. It's quite an economy where, quite a prosperous country. And I also think this is why, Australian consumers are willing to pay more for a more sustainable solution. There's more room for that. So it's easier to introduce products. And I would say, in fact, like to the investors or people who have technology wanting to move to Australia, I think one challenge is often we're seen as sort of far away in the world, isolated, small population, 25 million people, so relatively a small market. But then I would say on the other side, one thing that's good about Australia is that when things happen sometimes a bit more after they happen in Europe and in the US, we sort of follow the technology. But when there is technology that comes and it happens, it can happen quite quickly. So things are I think it can be a very good platform for new technology to be sort of implemented into the market. So with that, I think, and consumers, like I said, there's a good demand for it.
Okay, and Mark, in the States?
Yes, obviously a lot of the brands that you've heard, again, over the last couple of days are leading that charge and trying to make consumers more aware, again, on things that perhaps haven't been considered as much, circularity, reuse of materials, and obviously, recycling carbon, which is big in industry and on the consumer side as well. So I think it's largely being led by the brands and by certain states, such as California and others, that are really leaders in consumer awareness and the, if you want to say, the actioning of that interest into regulatory scheme that's fairly unique.
Yeah. Okay. It's interesting because I wouldn't say that in the UK bio is. I don't know if you ask the average person on the street what is bio or what is the bioeconomy. I think they probably can understand packaging, right? In sort of recycled content and that sort of stuff. But I'm not sure. So it's interesting to hear that. Ramjee, I'm going to skip that question for you now, just because there's huge opportunities in India, right? So I guess. What are the barriers to preventing, because this is all about scalability and how do we get there as quick as possible, right? So what barriers do you have, and is there anything that international partners could help you with?
One barrier that I clearly saw in my own eyes is there can be greenwashing, all right? Given the entire population, it's a huge population, and if greenwashing becomes name of the game from the business's perspective, then it becomes challenging. That's one. The second thing is, of course, cost will be a heavy thing in terms of making it happen. Because if you look at, you have to look at the bottom of the pyramid, which is much more larger than the top of the pyramid. So that will be one. Technologies which will be required to scale up to that big extent. So this will be the challenges, these will be major challenges which has to be overcome.
Okay. And I mean, you spent your time, the last 48 hours, primarily with Europeans, right? 70% of our delegates are European, and 20% North America, and 10% other. For all three of you, what's the one biggest difference between, I guess, mainland Western Europe to where you are working?
I would quickly say the regulatory scheme, I think, is probably the biggest difference. Again, we've got companies, global companies, looking at the same, I'm going to say, processing and end products and beginning raw materials, and they're doing it under different regulatory schemes. Some are allowed to use GMO products, some are not. Some are allowed to use, food-based substances as substrates. So I think the regulatory and working within that regulatory scheme makes it very unique and different.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few differences, but I think one that I would probably raise now is sort of our vision on recycling, like for some reason. And here, like I hear a lot of the talks, and also globally in Europe, like recycling does seem like to be an option or part of the circular economy. In Australia, we have maybe, I don't know, like perhaps maybe given up on the idea, or I guess what happened, Yambrin raised it, from China in 2018. That hurt us a lot in Australia, or China put a ban on Australian exporting waste to China, and we're just exporting like mixed waste. And this was the waste management method in Australia, shipping everything. They stopped in 2018. It was a good wake-up call. Then Australia started shipping it to other countries, Indonesia, but then every country, one by one, sort of said no. And now we're with this problem, and we said, okay, now we have to manage our own waste. This is our responsibility. We have to find ways to manage it. And so recycling comes on, obviously as an option. We look at different ways, and the challenge is we have such a small, very low population density, so everything is spread. And we have, like I said, small volumes again. So, to invest in such infrastructure, it's very difficult. And what has happened is the government has then pushed hard for recycling, but it hasn't been effective. We're just too costly. And also at the consumer level, we only have two bins in Australia. We have the red bin that goes to landfill. We have a nice yellow bin that's recycling, but everything is commingled waste. And then it's really hard. We can separate glass and metals quite easily, and then cardboard, and then plastic is just a disaster. And there's companies that have taken that challenge on board, but actually recently there's been a few scandals. They were sort of stockpiling, so getting paid to get all the plastic, stockpiling, and then never recycled it. There was a small fire and then everybody found out. So huge scandal on recycling. I think to me that's the big. So yeah, big difference, and we're more looking out now on, I guess, compostable solutions, more towards that angle, I think. So that's the main difference. Maybe it doesn't work for us, or maybe we need a lot more investment.
If it makes you feel any better, the UK doesn't know from one county to another the recycling scheme. Yeah, it's completely different. So it makes sense. Ramjee, you're going to finish with you because I don't want you to miss your flight.
Thank you.
I don't want to have that on my conscience, okay? So we'll let you sort of have the last word, and then we'll sort of wrap up.
Thank you. Starting point in terms of recycling, that's much more advanced compared to India. It's where 60 to 70% still is in the landfills. Informed consumers, right, that I see here, they know what they are speaking. They understand. So that's a topic which is discussed on a day-to-day basis, which is not there. It is more of cine stars what they do rather than finding out what happens there. So that informed consumers. Not the least, definitely I would not see a conference in India on biomarkets in which a landowner comes and presents himself and says, can you get a land from me, right? Like the Port of Amsterdam. I was really thrilled by that. I would definitely not say it, and I appreciate for that.
Fantastic. Well, listen, sorry we had to rattle through that a little bit, gentlemen, but obviously, with the exception of Ramjee, Some of us will be having a drink outside. So anyway, please put your hands together. I know it's right at the end of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Guys.
Thank you.